And welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today on Fire for Life with Temple Hayes. I want to honor our sponsor, ILLI, the Institute for Leadership and Lifelong Learning. We are so glad that you've tuned in and you're saying, wow, this is, I'm so glad I'm taking the time. Well, we really want to honor Adrian Emery, a tremendous difference maker, someone that's making a difference and has been all of his life, really all of his life. And Adrian thinks so much about the work he's doing. He's joining us today from Australia. So welcome to our show, Adrian. I've very much been looking forward to talking with you and your passion. You're such a passionate man, and thank you for all that you do.
Well, thank you, Temple. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. And I love having these conversations because I think we can all make a difference. That's my purpose in life. No matter how small that difference is, it's like a little pebble being thrown into a pond. The ripples go out and you never know. You know, it's not about being grandeur or fame or fortune. It's just being a humble person going along. But I think it's really important to stand up for what you believe in. That's how you make a difference. You know, you got to take a stand. I think you have to have critical thinking and that ability to be true to yourself, because authenticity is such a rare thing today. You know, we're becoming such a plastic society because of social media and mass media and everybody just being the same clone. So I think just to make a difference, all you got to do is be yourself.
You're so, I love that and what you're saying. And, you know, being a Leo and having a lot of energy, I am misunderstood often by people, and they'll say, oh, you know, she just wants to be famous. But
Yeah.
the truth of the matter is always about that is a definitive misunderstanding. I want my work to be famous. Me, listen, I would rather just sit in my backyard with my non-alcoholic margarita and call it a day and play with my pets. No, it's not about that. And it's not about that for you. And I wish people didn't label things and make it like this absolute truth, because I'm not about, I mean, I was learning speaking courses going, I don't ever want to stand in front of people and talk. You know, most of the things that I'm doing and that Adrian Emery is doing today, we do it because we want what we're teaching, what we've understood, to be known in the world. Maybe somebody else gets the credit, but we definitely want the work to be known because, you know, we have things to offer. And I want to know about with your life. Like, I know I've been reading about you and you've been impacting with the ripple effect for a very long time. How did you get into the line of work that you're in? Why does any of this matter to you? Tell our listening audience about Adrian Emery today.
Okay, but before I do that, Temple, let me just pick up on what you said there, because I think it's a very important point, and it is probably one of the platforms of my work, and as you say, why I do what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important for people to understand that it's not necessarily important what you do, but it's how you do it, why you do it, and what you do with it. Now, for example, what you're just talking about, if you give it to what I call your negative ego, meaning, you know, I want to be famous or
Right.
I want to be important, that's your negative ego. We
Right.
all have an ego. An ego is a very important part of being a human being. But we also have a purpose. We also have a mission in life. We also have something that comes from deep within our core that we have to do. I'm sure this is the same for you as for me. This is not something a really good friend of mine said to me the other day. He's proofreading for me or my new book, Tuning, and he's saying, you know, look, I admire you for doing this because I don't think there's any hope. And I said, Andrew, I don't have a choice. You
Right.
know, we
Mhm.
people like us, we don't have a
We
choice.
don't have a
And
choice.
I think, therefore, and I'm coming back to answer your question, that it's very important. Why do you do this? I'm not doing this for me. I'm not doing this to make money or be famous. I am doing this purely and simply because it's something that I need to do to express my soul.
Sure.
It's not my issue, it's not my problem, and it's not my concern, the effect that that has. I believe that's up to the universe or God or creation or whatever word you want to
Mhm.
use. That's fine. My concern or my responsibility is to be true to myself and to joyfully express who I am and allow that expression to go into the world. What that expression achieves is really none of my business.
Mhm.
Whereas I think if you become overly focused on, well, I want to do this in order to get something, then
Yeah.
that's your negative ego, because your negative ego is very grasping and acquisitive and always has an ulterior motive. And that's where people misunderstand people like you and me. I'm an Aquarian, you're a Leo, we're on the
Right.
opposite end, but very, very similar in
Mhm.
the sense that we really don't seek the limelight. I mean, Leos are often targeted for people who seek the limelight. Aquarians would. I'm like you. I have a beautiful 10-acre garden that I've built over my life. I would much prefer to be out there just weeding, gardening, communing with nature than doing this. But if I was just doing that, I would feel incredibly selfish and it would rob me of my inner peace, because there's another part of me that knows that this is something that I must do. This is something that I have to do
Mhm.
and that I need to fulfill my purpose and my mission. So to now come back to your question, who is Adrian? And that more or less sort of sums it up, that I've known this all my life, since I was a very, very young child. I used to look at society, the Western world in which we grew up, and think, this is not really ticking all the boxes for me. There's something missing, there's something wrong, and I really want to build a better society. And so I realized, like Elon Musk, that if I wanted to build a better car, I needed to study how cars were made. And
Yeah.
so I spent most of my formative youth studying society, not just Western society, but all societies, all religions, all philosophies, all cosmologies, all different worldviews. And as a very young child, I used to often think, well, if I was an ancient Inca or an ancient Persian or an ancient Roman, or a Greek, I would have a completely different, what I'm now calling paradigm or worldview or set of concept or mores. And so I very early learnt that we live within a construct that is not really real, in the sense that we need to be able to break through the paradigm. And particularly today, this false narrative that we are being fed daily really illustrates this point, that people tend to end up living in a world that is really not based in reality. It's based in what the elite want to feed them. Now that we have this social media, mass media, daily communication, but it is still a narrative that is fed to us. And I'm calling that a paradigm.
Mhm.
And my life has been devoted to what I call the coming paradigm shift in humanity. I do believe very positively and optimistically that we are about to go through the largest quantum leap in spiritual evolution that has ever happened in the history of humanity. What is about to happen has never happened before, in the sense that we are going to break free. Now, a lot of commentators look at what's happening, particularly in America and the Western world now, from an economic perspective or a social perspective or a cultural perspective. I like to look at it from a cosmic perspective. So all the things that are happening now on the world stage need to be, one of my favorite sayings is, have the guts to join the dots. So don't just
Mhm.
accept the narrative that is being given to you. Exercise that brain of yours, that critical thinking, to really look beyond the false narrative and go, what's really happening? And sometimes to do that, you need to take a much larger perspective, what I'm calling a cosmic perspective, and looking at the waves. So we're not just looking, a lot of people are talking about empire change when they talk about America and what's happening, and
Mhm.
China's going to be the next empire. But that's still a very, very short-sighted, myopic view, rather than looking at what's happening from millennia, meaning thousands of years, maybe even more, that this is a massive shift in consciousness, in human consciousness, that is occurring. So to answer your question very briefly, my life has been devoted to preparing humanity for that quantum shift.
Love that. And I was tuning in to you as you were having a conversation with the executive director. And I was like, wow, I resonate on such a deep level with everything that you're saying. And to go back, because a lot of our listeners and some of them have been, following the show for soon be 15 years now.
Wow,
But many
congratulations. That's
of but
fantastic.
many of them are, they also pursue, getting out in public and, stuff like that. And I wanted to highlight, I want to go deeper into what you just talked about, but I also want to remind people of back to what you said, that even though we teach, we have a choice. On a soul level, there are times when we have a choice by not having one. In other words, when I was seeing this energy come towards me as a youngster, when I would, feel this energy of, you're supposed to speak out loud in class, I would go, no, no, not me, or I would go to a meeting and they would say, we hear you're a speaker and our speaker didn't show up. Would you please do it? I mean, it's like, it's your soul call. And what you and I know is that, I mean, a lot of times it was very uncomfortable. I remember many times back in the day when I would go, I don't have one thing to say that somebody doesn't already know, and I would just go through sweating and sweaty palms, and they've heard that already, and all that. So for those of you that are tuning in and your soul is calling you, let me just tell you, your soul's going to win. And that's what Adrian's saying too. So you may as well just give in, because I mean, people literally will walk up to you on the street and go, they're waiting on you. They're waiting on you to do your show. They're waiting on you to offer this or whatever. And to duly note, it doesn't mean that it was ever that comfortable. It was just more uncomfortable not following the path. And I think
Yeah, look,
that's a
I'm so
real
glad you,
core thing,
yeah, I'm really glad you've said all that, because look, I don't think it's ever comfortable, because it's not just about the actual public speaking, whether, even though you and I are sitting in rooms, it's still public speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's more what we're saying,
Yeah.
and what we're saying is, I can remember, again, going back to a very, very young child, one of the things that my mother used to say to me the most was, for someone who's supposedly so intelligent, I don't know how you could be so stupid, because I was talking about New Age stuff before the New Age even existed. I didn't realize that it was that revolutionary, because to me it was, well, this is just the way life is,
Right.
because I could see it from that cosmic perspective. What I had difficulty was funneling it down to within the Western paradigm. What we're doing now, and the second thing that I want to say in response to what you just said is, and the reason I am doing this now, it is time.
Yeah.
Now is the time. We're not going to go into politics, but people are so preoccupied with the geopolitical stage and what's happening on it, rather than it is time for us, what I call the light workers, or whatever you want to call them, every single individual, to speak up, even if it is only in your little world, even if it is only in your family or your neighborhood or your friends or your club or wherever you exist. It doesn't have to be a podcast. It doesn't have to be a book. It
Right.
doesn't have, because it's a seesaw,
Right.
On one side, you've got the masses, and there's very few of us on the other side of the seesaw. But as more and more people climb up and make a commitment to themselves, to their core, to their soul, to their being, to their story, whatever it is that you want to call it, then gradually the scales will shift, and the energy of light, the energy of making a difference, will grow and become
Mhm.
more predominant. So it's a very, very important,
Yeah.
not to think, oh my God, I've got to be on the world stage. I've got to be this. That's your ego.
Mm,
It doesn't work that way.
mm-mm.
But every time you speak, every time you make a decision, every time you interact, it's an opportunity to do the right thing. It's an opportunity to be more loving, more caring, more honest, more sincere. Or do I just give in? Look,
Mhm.
it could be your relationship with your spouse. I mean, doesn't need to be grandiose.
Right.
It's a very humble, but it's also, as you said, which one is more uncomfortable? Am I more uncomfortable being myself, or am I more uncomfortable denying myself? And you get to the point where, as you said, I call it choiceless, the same
Mhm.
as what you said. There is no choice. You have no choice because it's, as I said to my friend, I don't have a choice. This is something I have to do.
Mhm.
You get to that point of conviction where, yeah, it's non-negotiable, you know?
Absolutely. It reminds me of not long ago, I was invited on a Zoom call and there were, 20, 30 people there. And there was this one guy that he was talking and he didn't realize it, but he was muted and he went on and on. And and then finally the host said, "Well, Gary, do you have anything to say?" He said, "Well, I just said some of the most amazing things, but I was muted the whole time. In my mind, I was saying all these things." And that's a lovely message of what you're saying is that wherever you are, I don't know about you, but every day I get an opportunity to not be muted, right? And it could be like just talking to a friend about, like a friend said the other day, it's like, well, it's hard to see some of the things going on, Temple, about gay people. And I'm not muted. And I go, I'm a human being. And I don't, yes, there's the label, but that label, like I don't say, oh, I'm on with Adrian today and he's a heterosexual and Temple's a gay. It's like, what is going on? It's like I
Mhm.
am a spiritual being immersed in spiritual law, governed by natural laws. And the better I can understand them, the better my life works, as does everyone else's. And so
Yeah,
it's like we create these, like you said, these limited paradigms, even about following our soul, does not equate to how many people like you on Facebook or, I mean, there's sometimes I'm on there and I go, oh my gosh, I just don't think I can do this anymore.
yeah,
It's just so frou-frou. And it's like, probably this is true for you. Some of the moments I feel like I'm had the most impact was one-on-one, or I was walking the beach with a couple of friends visiting me. At the time I lived coastal in Florida, and I hadn't seen them in a while. And we come up and there's these conch fritters that had been washed up and the tide had gone too far. And I said, "Amy and Mike, I love you, but I got to go to work." "What do you mean?" "I got to help them get back. There were hundreds of them. I got to help them get back." And they went, "Oh, okay." So they jumped in and started helping me, and we'd take them out to the water because they were dying. They were working so hard to get out of that grit of sand that it was like a quicksand. They were smothering themselves. And I said, "We aren't going to make it easy for those birds. They got to work for their food." So this man comes along and he goes, "Excuse me, but can I ask you, what are you doing?" And I told him. He went, "Oh, okay, well, oh, all right." So he goes on his way. And then a little while later, he comes back and he goes, "Well, you're a really nice person." And I said, "Well, thank you. But to me, that doesn't have anything to do with it. This is
yeah,
my earth. This is your earth. And this is the comforter's earth. And we are
yeah.
coexisting. And to me, because now I see it and now I'm aware of it, there's a responsibility that I'm held accountable for, being someone that stands for life rights and writing books about it. It's a responsibility for you and for me. And
Mm.
so in a little while, I looked down just innocently. I wasn't minding his business, but I looked down and there he was, taking
Yeah,
him out to the water. So I love what you're saying, Adrian. And that, I think, often when people say, oh, this is martyrdom, there's so much to be done. Oh, and there's so many organizations to give to, and there's so many things you could be a part of, and there's so many purposes that you could be. You know what they're saying to me? What I hear? You're not going to do anything. You're just
Yeah,
making it so big.
making an excuse to be lame.
You're making an
And the
excuse.
lameness comes first, and then people look for a justification. Oh, well, it's too big. Or
Yes,
going back to what I said before, the government should do something about it.
right. Good
Like
luck
the
with that.
United Nations should do something about it. Somebody else should do something. And,
Mhm.
it's very interesting, Temple, what you just said, because there's a very famous old parable about that where there are two people walking along this beach, and one of them starts, there's thousands of jellyfish washed up, and one of them starts chucking them back. And the other guy says to him, "What are you doing?" And he said, I'm chucking them back. He says, you can't make any difference. There's literally thousands of them. And the first guy says, sure made a difference to that one.
That's
You
right.
know,
That's that
so
beautiful starfish story, right?
yeah, all we can
So
do
true.
is make a difference. And it's like you said, it is really one to one. But I just wanted to go back to that point, because I guarantee, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you didn't initially uh, make a commitment to do that because you thought, well, I'm a writer. I'm sure your heart and your soul was just caring, and it would have been a natural response to think, oh, I got to do something.
I've been
Correct?
doing it all my life. I've
Yeah.
been
And
doing
then
it
later
all my
on, the
life.
mind kicks in and goes, oh, well, yeah, okay, I'm a planetary citizen. We're here. We've got to take responsibility. But my argument is that the initial impetus to do doesn't come from the mind, doesn't come from that intellect of, oh, well, I'm a planet, because then you're back in ego. Oh, well, I know,
Right.
great, I'm saving all
Right.
these,
Oh gosh,
But
no.
if it's just like, oh my God, I got to do something because that being is suffering, I can make a difference to that being, even though whatever it is. It's why I do the garden. I have spent 50 years of my life. I started with a bare paddock. I'm not sure. I'd always explain to American viewers. So a paddock to us is almost a dead piece of earth. So it
Okay.
had two cows on it, had no life. The ground had been trampled, no trees, nothing. It is now the most beautiful garden ecosystem. And to me, and I've devoted my life to it because it's a living example of what we're talking about, that we
Mhm.
are here to be what I call the divine husbandman.
Yep.
Where humanity went wrong is disconnecting, unplugging, becoming divorced from nature. Now,
Absolutely.
you said a really important thing before, which is that and spirituality, unfortunately, can have a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of confusion. But for me, the essence is, as you just said a minute ago, learning to live in harmony with natural law.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yep.
such a profound concept. There are natural laws. They're not prescriptive. They don't tell us what we should do. They just explain what happens. And I
Exactly.
use the example of the law of gravity. If you pick something up and drop it, nobody's telling that thing that it needs to fall. That's just what happens.
Right.
Natural law is what naturally happens.
Mm-hmm.
And when we attune our being more and more to natural law so that we're in the flow, which is what our tuning, my book, is about, when we're in the flow, going back to your example, you just naturally pick up that, what did you call them? The things on the
Conch.
beach?
They're like a shell. They're like a little creature in a shell. Conch, Conch, fritter,
Oh,
Fri.
yeah, conch critter, right. So
Conch fritter,
So
yeah.
you just naturally bent down because you were in harmony with natural law,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
because your being was part of nature,
Yeah.
and they're part of and we're all one. And that is my message more than anything. When to become a part of that oneness.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to this paradigm shift that I believe we're going through, the the basic characteristic of this paradigm is separation. We all feel separated from each other. We feel separated from nature. We feel separated from life. We feel, WHO has just declared the number one pandemic in the Western world is loneliness depression.
Mhm.
Mental illness is now rampant right throughout the Western world. How is it that in the most affluent, advanced society that has ever existed on the planet, with more than anybody has ever had, we are so mentally sick? It's
Mhm.
because we're separated.
Yep.
We're disjointed. We're separated from nature. We're separated from each other, and we're separated from ourselves.
Mhm.
So for me, the new paradigm, I'm calling it singularity. It's this oneness. It's this understanding that all life is sacred. All forms of life are sacred, and all forms of life have an equal right and respect to be alive. If I can help something, whether that's a plant or an animal or a fish or a sea urchin, whatever it is, then that is not because it's my responsibility, not because it's my obligation or it's going to make me feel good about myself, but because it's the natural thing to do. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? Like
It's just
if
an automatic, natural response. And we're taught otherwise. In 2007, I wrote this little, The Right to Be You. And it's like everybody has the right to be. Homeless have the right to have a home. Animals have the right to remember that this is their earth too. They're not here for
yeah,
you to just be a sportsman to put their head on a trophy on a house, or no, 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 no. It's the sacredness of life. And I'm loving this conversation because it's so true. And a lot of people are having sicknesses and ailments because they don't go outside. They don't put their feet on the ground. They live on concrete. And this just goes on about, issues that people have because they have disassociated with the earth itself and the intuitive and instinctive power that we naturally have. And in
yeah,
America, it happens the first time when you're told, jump under your desk because somebody might bomb you, like, oh, well, when's that happened last? Well, it hasn't, but get ready and the alarm's going to go off. And so then it starts out your program that, oh, this preacher, this teacher, this person, this louder voice tells you what to do, and you're supposed to jump or say how high. And
yeah.
we're supposed to develop our intuition, our listening, and go, that's a bunch of crap. That's
Yeah,
not
that's right. Yeah,
true. But
yeah,
unless you learn, and what we see now is that we've had so many generations being taught that they're broken. They're broken instead of you are whole, you are holy, you are amazing. Build upon that. I mean, it has to break down, doesn't it? I love your idea that we are looking at the new paradigm. Is your book out already?
yeah. No, well, it's in the process. I'll just give your viewers a look at it if they can sort of
Please.
see that. So it's coming out on September the 17th.
Wait, can you hold
Um,
it up one more time?
one more time, so people, can you see that? Dial
Oh,
tuning, it's called
and thank
the
you.
art.
I love the Temple of Understanding, the Tao
Yeah,
tuning, the Art of Flow. I love that. I love the whole energy of that. It feels very,
yeah,
very, very
yeah.
powerful.
So,
But everyone,
well,
you can go to Adrian's website, adrianemery.com. You can also see it in the description of this show, but you can stay in touch so you can get this book. It's very powerful, the work you're doing. I know you
so
don't do
let,
it for a pat on the back, but I'm
so
glad
let's
that
just go
you said
back
yes.
to the conversation, which I think is very important, because within this paradigm, and the Temple of Understanding. So there's three books in the series. This is book
Okay,
two. Book number one is called Personal Sovereignty.
got
So
it.
personal sovereignty is is the first part, which is the ability to make your own decisions and become authentic. What we're talking about. In
Mhm.
other words, listen to myself, make my decisions, being true to myself. Then, once you know where you're going and what you want to achieve, you need to learn how to be successful, which is Tao tuning. But let's just go back to the paradigm, because I think the paradigm shift is important. And the reason I called it the Temple of Understanding is that we live within a monstrous misunderstanding that has deliberately and consciously been placed upon the Western world for many, many millennia.
Mm-hmm.
And the first and fundamental error in that paradigm is, let's just call it original sin. You know, it has many names, has many versions, but it's basically what you were just saying, that we are taught from a very, very early age that we are wrong. You
Mm-hmm.
know, that there's something wrong with us, that we
Yes.
can't just trust our inner divine nature.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, one of the things that I say is, you know, you are God, you are divine. Now, most people go, oh, that's blasphemy, you know,
Right.
but at the end of the day, you know, there's only one definition of God, and I don't really like using the word God. That's why I chose the word Tao. But there's only one definition of God that makes sense, which is that God is all it is.
Mm-hmm.
So if God is all it is, and I'm part of all it is, then I must be divine. So when, again, going back to the beginning of our conversation, to be able to say, you know, I am God is not blasphemy or big noting myself or, you know, I am God and you are not. No, every particle, every grain of sand, every leaf, every flower, everything is part of that universal energy, and everything is perfect the way that it is. And that's the second misunderstanding, is that that does not mean that you're finished or that you're done or that you can be complacent, because it's progressive perfection, meaning that you can always grow, you can always become more of who you are, you can always become more loving, you can always become more kind, you can always become more true to yourself. It doesn't ever end. And so that's the second. And then the third one is that life is, you know, we're taught, well, we're here to earn salvation. You know, we're here to get to another life. We're
Right.
here to, because we have to suffer. We're here because it's a penance. You know, we're here. No, no. Life is a gift. You know, again, if you believe in whatever divinity you believe in, divinity would not give you a gift that was a gift of suffering. It's
Yes.
got to be a gift of joy. You
Mm.
know, life has to be something that you celebrate and enjoy, and that is a wonderful gift. And so I use the analogy of, imagine that it's your birthday or Christmas and someone gives you a beautiful gift, you know, lovely box wrapped with a ribbon, card, everything. And so you grab that box and you go and put it in the cupboard. You don't even open it. You know, it's like, so, whereas if you're a little child, you know, you rip it apart, you pull all the wrapping off, scrunch it all up, you know. So I think we need to get back to that excitement and that exuberance and that appreciation. Because one of the things that I've learned about spiritual law, getting back to universal law, is that the more you appreciate, the more you are in gratitude and grateful, the more the universe gives you.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you're complaining, if you're negative, if you're bitching and moaning and going, oh, I don't have enough and I want more, the universe is not going to give you more. You
Right.
know, so we need to go back. There's a very simple triad. I'm not sure if you know about it, but it's be, do, have.
Mm-hmm.
And the negative ego is always in doing, in order, as I said before, in order to get. So I
Yes.
want to have more, and it doesn't have to be a possession. It could be more love, could be fame, going back to the very beginning of our conversation, whatever it is, money. But I want, so the ego wants. So I do in order to get. But if you go back to beingness, then that beingness just naturally does. As I said to you before, you picked up those conch shells not from your ego, not because you wanted to achieve something, but because your beingness
Mm-mm.
just wanted you, or gave you an impetus. It's actually a very fine line in there that people really need, I think, to understand is, what is the initial, I always call it, what's the fuel? What
Right.
is the fuel that actually motivates you? And that's why I like using the word Tao. Is it your ego or is it your Tao? Where does the impetus to do come from?
I
If it
believe
comes from,
we all have that natural instinct if we're not numbed out to it. And, it's like, and I know you're asking a generic question, but for me, it's it's like what I've always done. If there was a bug, I didn't kill it, I saved it. I would take it out. It wasn't like, oh, who's watching? It wasn't like, oh, it never enters my mind. It's just, I've been
Oh,
doing it since I'm a child, but because I do automatically respond to it. And through the years, people go, you saved that? And I go, yeah, of course I
yeah.
do. It's a
Why
living
not?
thing.
Yeah.
It's why maybe I'm here today. So I could see the bug, so I could save it. Because the next
Yeah.
person's going to come along and go, squirrel.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how did people get terrified of nature?
Oh,
It just fascinates me, at this spiritual community I served at in Florida. We had a family that had a lot of snakes and a lot of stuff. And so once a year, I would ask them to, bring them, and they would. And so the snakes crawling all over me, and but what was the kicker is a little girl walked up and had this snake, and I saw grown men cry, like, oh my gosh, I've been terrified of this idea of something all my life and never really been educated about it. And this
yeah.
little girl has transformed me. And
Yeah.
that's
Because
to
she had
me,
no fear.
no,
You
and
know,
I think
it's
that's part of what you're doing is you're planting a seed, like, to be open and to get the information so you won't just have your heart
yeah,
closed, you know.
yeah. So I believe that we became divorced from nature through this fear that we
Yes.
actually wanted to kill nature. We were afraid of the snakes and the spiders and the lions and the tigers wherever we went. Wherever Western man went without. And once we had guns and
Oh my
machinery,
gosh.
we were able to just obliterate nature and hopefully maybe cement the whole world if we could.
Right.
So that then we
Exactly.
wouldn't have to. And I live in the country, and it's really interesting. It's not that far from Sydney, which most people are aware is a very big city, and I see it all the time. Quite recently, where people will come from Sydney, they'll buy. We have some little blocks as well as larger. They'll buy a place up here, and the first thing they will do is to chop down every single tree on that property. And I just go, I mean, I really have to control myself from going, what are you
Mhm.
doing? But I think, okay, none of my business, bless them, just, but I think it's this fear, or
Yeah.
it's or the branches or the mess from the leaves, but as you say, like I always err on the side, even though going back to my garden, I always err on the side of allowing nature, allowing something to grow. I mean, it actually breaks my heart when I think, look, I'm sorry, tree, but you can't grow there.
Right.
It's like
I
I'm,
know. I
but I
know.
will try and transplant it. Or if I'm weeding and I think, oh, there's a worm, I need to be really careful not to just, And the other interesting thing, Temple, is that I've worked with a lot of people in my garden. And I see, because I'm very sensitive to it, that people will come, whether they're pruning or digging or whatever, and they're taking out their aggression on nature, you know. And I
Mm.
have to try to explain to them that you have to have a sensitivity. And I've got a very lovely story that I think I'll share, which I don't share a lot, but and this was very early on. I mean, we're talking probably 40 years ago, and I was brush cutting with a machine,
Mhm.
underneath trees too. And all of a sudden, I got told very, very clearly, back off. This is my home. And
Mhm.
I, you know, and
Yeah.
I, 40 years, I've never gone back and interfered in that little area,
Mhm.
because I know that even though that it is a garden, there needs to be spaces for whatever you want to call it, for wilderness, for wildlife, for the elves, for the fairy. But I'm not going to get into all of that. It doesn't really matter.
Right.
But there must be spaces for nature. In
Mhm.
other words, human beings, going back to this fear thing, because of our fear, we want to obliterate anything and everything that might be a potential danger.
Yeah.
But as you say, if you are in that oneness with nature, there is no danger. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? It's
There
like,
is no danger. No,
Snakes are not interested in human beings. I've been this close to snakes on my garden so many times. It's sorry, and I just back off, and they just back off. There's never ever been a problem, or
right.
I've got guest houses and people go, oh, there's a spider. Well, yeah, okay. You're
Yeah.
in the country, there's a spider. It's like,
People will
what?
say that sometimes in my house, oh, there's a spider, and I say, it lives here full
Yeah,
time, and
yeah,
please let it be.
yeah,
Like they
exactly.
look at me like, are you freaking kidding? But this is the part that you and I are talking about. I don't set out to change anyone, but I am going to speak my mind, so
Yeah.
I go, they're
And I'm not
guests.
going to kill that spider for you.
You're the guest. The
Yeah,
spider's been around hanging out in my bathroom. I mean,
yeah,
he's so little, like you need a
yeah,
magnifying glass. And they go, "Oh, did you know there's a spider in your guest bathroom?" Uh-huh. He lives
yeah,
here
I
all
know.
the time. Please
Aren't
don't
you
bother
lucky?
him. Please
Yeah,
don't bother him, and
yeah,
he's just really fine. And they go, and it's like, but it doesn't matter to me because, it's like this is part of the messaging that I live for.
yeah,
And it's so important. And anytime, like with your books and with your sharing, anytime we can be of service. I mean, I show often that the photos of Anthony Lawrence, that was the elephant activist, and I imagine you're familiar with his work, but he died. And when he did, elephants came from near and far and wept in front of his
oh,
home
yeah,
because he had passed. And you talk about shifting people when they
yeah,
see that, the
yeah,
being in that, the being
yeah.
having and doing that, just like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And I mean, there are many times I cry and I weep, and
Yeah.
because it's like, oh, mm, I had
Yeah,
hope.
look, I think that's a really important point that
Hmm.
going back to this, what I was saying before is that we justify, we make excuses. And what we've done, not only in destroying nature, but we've reduced uh, whatever we want to call it, not only animal consciousness, but plant consciousness to it doesn't feel, it's not sentient, it's not intelligent, it's just, and we did it with the American Indians and the Aborigines. They're just savages, and we need to baptize them. But going back to the elephants, I mean, and anyone who's got a pet, or like you has related to whether it's snakes or animals of any sort or nature, will know that, and that's what I was saying before. Within every single being is this beautiful spark of divine consciousness, of divine intelligence, of a knowing and a generosity of spirit. You know, yeah, elephant sweep. I mean, it's like most uh, animals have a much better sense of what I could call clan, or
Yep.
looking after each other than we do as human beings. But we
Yep.
see ourselves as so superior. We're more superior than nature. I don't think so.
I
I
don't
think this.
think
I mean, that
so. I
is
don't
such
think
a
so. And
big.
it's like, talk about karma. I have no idea because, like you, I'm not all of divine. I'm not all that. But it's like you just, when you think about karma, you go, oh man, I kind of hope you come back as a dog at the shelter. So and I don't, get into the personalization of that, because then I'm just as not much one step better than they are. But it's very disturbing, because somebody told somebody that one day that
Yeah,
had a negative belief system, and people bought
just
it. And
accept it.
I
Yeah,
remember when the dentist posted all the imagery of that he had killed this famous lion. Do you remember that? I haven't told the story in a while, but anyway, I mean, like, the airlines refused to bring back animals and stuff, and I was just really hoping that would stick. Because unless you need an animal and you need to take it, that was the part that I spoke about at the Parliament of the World Religions. It's like 1 billion lives every year. That includes shellfish, field animals. They give their lives every year and they never make it to anybody's plate.
Yeah.
It's just, and I always tell people, if you ever watch a crying calf watch his mother go through the slaughter, you'll never eat beef again. I mean, I still
Yeah.
can't get that image out of my mind. And it's been, 20 something years.
Yeah. Yeah. So this divine intelligence and ability to feel, I think to crystallize where we're going here is that where humanity went wrong is that we became so locked within our minds,
Here,
the
yeah.
thinking yama mind, where and I say, look, if you, and people might say, okay, you guys are talking about getting back to nature or getting back to natural. How does one do that? All you got to do is go into your body, because your body is a part of nature.
Yeah.
Humanity has got itself so tied up in knots now that it thinks that not only that it's superior to nature, that it's divorced from nature. We just, it's like living in a high-rise building. It's just so divorced from reality. And we are not only, as I said before, not only separated from each other, not only separated from ourselves, not only separated from everything, but we're also separated from our bodies.
Yes.
Because we live in our minds. We live within what I call this yama of thinking all day, every day. Thinking is important. You and I need thought in order to be able to work these devices and make sure we're on time, and we need thought to be able to talk. But thinking has got out of control.
Yeah.
We've lost control of the on-off switch.
Yeah.
So there needs to, whether you want to call it meditation, whether you want to call it mindfulness, whether you want to call it conscious awareness, whether you want to call it inner peace, it doesn't really matter. But there must be intervals. So, for example, I like to say that language depends upon pauses. Without punctuation, whether we're talking, whether I'm writing, whatever, without good punctuation, can't make sense. So someone who just keeps talking,
Right.
doesn't make sense. If you don't use punctuation in your text, it won't make sense. So because the brain is now perpetually jammed on and we've lost control of the on-off switch, it no longer makes sense.
Yep.
So everybody needs to learn how to turn the brain off. And that's the beauty of meditation or mindfulness or any spiritual practice, or going into nature, or going back to Tao tuning, which is, all about being in the flow. And one of the main characteristics of being in the flow is that time ceases to exist, and that the brain ceases to exist, that we are one with whatever we are doing. We become one with that situation. And I like to say, if I look at that, I go, this one is time. People either exist in the past or the future. And this one, the crossbar, horizontal bar, is space. So most people want to be somewhere where they are not.
Yes.
In other words, the grass is always greener.
Yes.
But the intersection of those 2 points is the now. The intersection of space and time is the now. And that is the gateway through which one needs to move or enter in order to get into eternity, the eternal now. And in that space, it's a completely different paradigm. It's what you're talking about. You're walking along the beach and a conch shell needs your assistance. There's no thought involved. It's just a spontaneous beingness. It's allowing your being to take control as opposed to the mind. And so what I like to say is that the negative ego has usurped control of what I call the corporate structure of consciousness. And the reason I call it the corporate structure of consciousness is that you have an intuition, you do have logic, you have gut feeling, you have gestalts of awareness, you have feelings, you have all these different parts of you that are equal. But we have said, oh no, it's got to be logic. It's got to be rational. Don't daydream. Don't feel. Don't have intuition. Don't trust your gut. The only thing, and this is called again this paradigm, which is the came from the Renaissance and Rene Descartes and the rationalist era, the scientific era within which we live. No, we got to prove it. You know,
Right.
it's got to go through the scientific process. You have to be logical. You know, go back to your analogy, your situation with the spider. Oh, but there's a spider in the bathroom. Yeah. Oh, you know, it might bite me. Yeah. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, no, just,
If you mess with it, I'll bite you.
yeah. You know,
Right. But it's just so yeah. And we must do more shows, you and I. Um,
yeah.
I
Great.
mean, really, there's so much in sync, with us. And I was just thinking, when you were doing that with your hand, you were actually showing the shape of our bodies. It's like, this is the shape of our bodies, and this is time, this is space, and in the center of that is the heart.
Yeah.
It is the heart. And in shamanism, one would teach that the lower three chakras are the physical, the emotional, and the mental, whereas the majority of people stay, or they either master it or it has full mastery over them. It sells a lot of products. It makes a lot of people wealthy. Yes. And that part of that energy of that. But the heart is the bridge that opens. And when it is open and in the space that you're talking about, the inner sanctuary, then you open to the greatness of the throat chakra, the third eye, the magic of telepathy, that you can get a sense about things. And it still fascinates me that we're in 2024 and we have this knowledge. But knowledge and practice are two very, very different things. But
Mm.
it's like people say, follow the money trail, right?
Oh, yeah.
Where the greed is, because we've been so duped. And so
Yeah.
many people have allowed ourselves to be duped. And
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, the majority.
right? I'm like, oh my word. It just is like, mm,
But
yeah,
going back to that, I mean, you sent me three questions of what I thought were my greatest achievements in
yes.
life. And the first one I said was clarity, going back to,
Hmm.
again, whatever you want to call it, the third eye, the brow chakra. But it's this that you and I have shared now extensively. It's this sense of knowing
Yeah.
that even as a very young child, hang on, I don't even know how I know. I don't even know what I know, but I just know that's wrong, you know, and I know that's right. And even though I'm sure in your life and certainly in my life, they have tried and tried and tried to convince me that I was wrong about so many things, but it's this sense of knowing. And that's why for me, my greatest achievement is that I did have the courage to go, no, this is what feels right to me. This is what I know is right. I don't know how I know. I didn't read it. I didn't learn it. Nobody told me. It's not something that came in from without, meaning from the world. It may have come in via my, chakra system
Mhm.
into my brow. I mean, I'm certain didn't come, but it's just an inner knowing. And the other thing I want to go back to is that, the third chakra is your gut. Even though most people are not even getting up into clarity, most people don't honor their gut, meaning, which is this gut knowing, and I used to do a lot of counseling and training, and I used to say to people, if you've got a very important decision to make, don't think about it. Don't do your pros and your cons and the logic. That is a part of it, yes. But at the end of the day, you need to go into silence and you need to see how you feel and what your gut,
Mhm.
what I call it your radar, your tendon, that chakra is like, if you've got that really turned on, you will know what's coming. It's
Yes.
like it's like this incredible Geiger counter radar sensing. Hang on, I can sense danger coming, or I can sense what's coming towards me without having to think about it or know it. And so you just naturally again pivot or shift or adjust, even though you may not be consciously intellectually aware of what's happening, but you're just in this state of knowingness. And so that clarity, that ability to be true to yourself, I think, well, I can only speak for myself, but for me, it's the key. Because if you don't have that clarity, then as you just said, you are easily duped.
Mm-hmm.
You are easily misled. You are going to believe the false narrative. You are going to be a clone. You are going to go on social media and be a follower. You are going to listen to whatever it is that's going to come along, and you're going to go, yeah, I'm going to grab on that bandwagon because I haven't really got the rudder, the anchor, the knowing, the conscience, whatever, again, whatever you want to call it. And the problem is that a lot of these words have been what I call bastardized, so it's like, oh, conscience, that's a very religious term,
Right.
it's not. Conscience
Yeah.
is an integral part of your beingness. It's got nothing to do with religion, it's got
Anything
nothing to do with
religion.
morality. It's got nothing to do with any of that stuff.
No, it
It's
doesn't. Mm-mm.
what do
Like
you know is right. Hmm?
like the word people use now is I don't want to be political. It's like politics have nothing to do with it. Policy and rules and amendments and all that. We're talking about human beings here. That's not political. These are basic rights of being a human being, or being an animal being, or being a mammal being, or whatever it may be. And it's
Yeah, we should
absolutely.
call it sociology, not politics.
Hello.
Unfortunately, politics has robbed us completely. As I said
Right.
before, we are so obsessed with these, people who posture on the world stage. And to be quite honest, I mean, most of them are, idiots, or of very limited intelligence,
Yeah.
and they're not there. I mean, one of my other blogs that I did quite recently, and I was saying, once upon a time, to want to be a leader meant that you wanted to serve,
Yeah.
that you wanted to do good, that you were a natural leader. Now
Right.
politics is all about graft and corruption and what's in it for me. Even if it is just fame,
Right.
even if it is power, it's
Right.
still what I want. I mean, I can't think of a single person on the world stage geopolitically, and they don't have any politicians. We could be in the United Nations, could be in a
Right.
church,
Yeah,
doesn't really
exactly.
matter.
Right.
But there aren't very many statesmen or statespersons, women,
Mhm.
whatever,
Mhm.
um, on. So there's this lack of leadership,
Yep.
and
Across the board.
across the board. And
Mhm.
going back to where we began, this, and not just you and I in this little podcast, but
No.
it's the positive part of the internet, which has a huge deficit, but
Hmm.
the asset of the internet is that now the leadership is coming from the bottom up.
Right.
The leadership is coming from grassroots, coming from people. And that's why, going back to the beginning, people like you and I are being, you got to speak up. You got to do something. You got to, that's why I'm going on these podcasts. I mean, I, I have the one thing in my life that I don't go anywhere near is, and never have, is social media. But I've realized that if I want to publicize my book, that if I want to get my message out today,
You gotta.
you don't have a choice.
No, you don't. You don't have a
So,
choice. Well, it's
and
really been a pleasure. I don't want it to end either, but it's been so great being with you. And I would love you to write Andrea if you feel open to it, and say, let's have me on again after the book is out of bed, and let's talk
sure,
deeper and further.
yeah.
I truly enjoy and love sitting and just hearing you, and the deep, well thought through felt. I'm talking about
Yeah.
the head, but that's there, that's evident. But just all of it is it's quite magical.
Well, I'd
So
love to do
glad.
that. And I think it would be really good to, even, this has been a very uh, big smorgasbord of,
Right.
of, of, of many, many ideas. And I think it would be really good to tailor it a little bit more, because I think that you and I obviously speak the same language, and
Hmm.
and we can really ramble on and quickly follow each other.
Right.
But maybe we're losing people who are going, well, hang on, that was a very interesting point. But then
Right. What's next?
we,
What
we
might
moved
you
on,
do?
you know.
Yep.
I think it would be great to really focus and hone in on specific areas that then people can, because it's like digestion, you know, you can't just put something in your mouth. You have to digest it.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
ideas are the same, you
Let's
know.
do that.
We have to take an idea into our being. And like I love, even with my book, you know, I'll pick up my book before I go to bed and I'll just read a couple of paragraphs and go, okay, and put it down and go, I really need to understand that. Even though I
Right.
wrote it, I go, I need to really get that. I need to understand that. I need to take it in. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
You know,
Totally. All the time.
when
Yeah.
if people want change in their lives, I think that I think they need to assimilate and really grapple with a concept, with an idea, and go, okay, what's that triggering for me? Why don't I accept that? What is my fear? Where is that going to take me in terms of what are the changes that I need to make within myself?
Sure.
Or that idea is not going to become a reality. Does that
Exactly.
make sense? It's a
Yep.
great idea, but I didn't change. And then 6 months later, oh, well, it didn't make any difference.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know, well,
let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do a next show and be more specific.
yeah.
Okay. It's
Okay.
really been a pleasure having you. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And you definitely want to know more about Adrian Emery. That's ADRIAN Emery.com. And thank you for joining us. And
Thank you, Temple. It's been truly a pleasure and love to talk to you.
oh,
Hopefully we can do it again.
we will do it again. Just reach
We
out
will
to
do it again.
Andrea and let's get it on the calendar. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye.